Hello all my YouTube friends. Thanks for coming back to my kitchen. I'm Jeanette. 3 days ago in real time, I went and picked up 2 gallons of fresh milk, milked directly into a pan that I brought home. I strained it, put it in my refrigerator, and then 2 days ago, I took the cream off of those 2 gallons of milk that I had. And this is the cream that I collected right here. I've left it out on my counter for 2 days to age. Because aged cream makes better butter, and it also makes butter faster and easier. And I've reached the point where I want to get my butter churned today. But there's a couple things I need to do first to make sure that it's the right time. The first thing I'll do is take the churn attachment out. And you can see the thick cream on there. And I have a spoon that I'm just going to dip down in there. See how chunky that is? So that has soured and curdled. So I'm just going to give that a taste. That tastes wonderful. It just tastes like cultured sour cream. Has really good flavor, and I think it's going to make great butter. The other thing that I want to do is take the temperature of the butter and see what it is in there. And our house is pretty warm, obviously, because that has gone up to 74 degrees. The temperature I want my cream to be at is closer to 60 degrees. So I don't have enough room in my refrigerator to put this big churn, and it's winter time, so what I'm going to do is put it outside, and I'll just have to wait till it cools off. Maybe it'll cool off in about an hour because it's somewhere around 30 degrees out there. Well, I've left my jar and my cream outside long enough that it got down to the temperature that I wanted to, so I'm ready to go ahead and start churning. With this, all you do is you crank and it turns that apparatus down underneath around, and it stirs the cream around and around and around. It actually smashes the fat particles together. There are a few things with your cream that make butter churning easier or harder. Probably the first one would be the age of the cream. As I told you, I let my cream age for 2 days after I skimmed. Now the temperature of the cream makes a lot of difference too. It churns better if it's down to 60. Whenever the temperature of the cream is a little higher, the fat globules won't connect with each other quite as well. You'll have a soft butter, and it has a hard time separating itself from the milk. It needs to be cooler so they can bunch up together. Now the stage of lactation in the cow is important too, because if she's at the beginning of her lactation period, you're going to get a faster cream, a better cream. The globules are more the right size. Bigger globules of fat in the cream will make butter faster. Now as the lactation, the time that she makes milk goes on, the fat globules get smaller and they don't want to join together as well to make butter. Another thing that makes a lot of difference is the food that the cow eats. In the spring and the summer, a cow has lots of lush green grass, and that makes the best milk and makes the best cream and consequently the best butter. But in the winter time, which is where we are right now, the cow doesn't get as much good grass. My Amish friend who owns the cow, he's got her in a pretty good sized pasture, and we've had some decent weather off and on where the grass could actually grow even though it's winter. But whenever it's cold, and especially whenever it snowed on there, he has to feed her hay, and it doesn't make as good a cream. She doesn't make as much milk, and consequently the butter will be a little bit harder to churn, take longer to make it into butter. It typically takes 20, 25, maybe even 30 minutes for this to happen. So I'm going to get old guy to help me out. In old times, it was often a job for children to do while they were sitting around, or grandma to do if she lived with family, or grandpa, because it's a really easy job that doesn't take that much strength or endurance. It just gets a little bit tiresome after a while. So let's go see if old guy wants to take a turn. Well, we decided it might just be easiest to set him up here where I was at the table, and we got a tall chair so he can sit down. I was standing up. I can see some progress in there because first thing that it does is get thicker. It whips, actually, if it's cold enough. If it's cold, it whips faster. If it's a little warmer, it doesn't whip quite as bad. Alright, we're just going to take the lid off and look down in there, see if we can. It's pretty much just whipped cream down in there, and I think it's making some good progress. I can see where it might be starting to separate just slightly. We can tell that something's starting to happen in there because the fat globules are joining together, and then there's separate milk that is splashing up on the sides and washing the cream off of the sides of the jar. I can see down in there that there's a separation that's definitely starting. So we just got to turn some more. I can see through the side that things are happening. Now we're very close to being done. This is separating, and you can see the lighter colored milk and the darker yellow chunks of little pieces. They're not really chunks, but tiny little specks of butter that are separating from the milk. Just a couple minutes later, you can see that we've progressed to the next step. The butter is bunching up better, and we're not very far from being done, but we're going to do it for another couple minutes. You see the difference inside there? How the milk goes by and the yellow of the butter goes by, and the milk is washing down the inside of the jar. It's not the cream that's separating on there. And more, as every second goes by, you can see it clumping together better.
I can feel it on the handle. It's getting pretty difficult. The butter is wanting to ride around all the way.
Okay, I think that means we're done. Let me look at it one more time. Yes, we're definitely done. You see those two big globs of butter in there? Those were on each side of the paddle, and as he was turning the paddle around in there, they were just collecting, and that's what was making it hard to turn. Well, with our butter all clumped up in there and separated, then what we're going to do is pour off the buttermilk. See how nice and thick that buttermilk is? I would expect it probably tastes just like store-bought buttermilk if I'm going to go by the way the cream tasted, because it tasted like store-bought cultured cream, and I didn't put anything in it. Just to show you the difference between the color of the butter, the light's not the greatest down inside there, and the color of the buttermilk that came off, the contrast in stark whiteness and deep yellow. You can see a few little flecks of butter that came out with the buttermilk. I'm really happy about the separation of that. What I'm going to do now is to pour some cool water, basically the same temperature as the cream was, into my butter churn, and then I'm going to put my paddle back down in there. And after I get it screwed on, I'm going to slosh that around a few times to just help rinse the butter. And then I'm going to drain that off. Then I'm going to put in another quart of water that is cooler than the first one I put in. And after I get that on, I'm going to turn that around a few times. Now I don't want to tear my butter up, but I'm doing this to rinse some of the extra buttermilk out of there. Then I'm going to do it one more time, and this time I have some water that I put some ice in to make it even colder. And I'm using my hand this time to mash it around because the paddle wasn't working so well to get it separated from the side. I don't want to work water into this, but I want to just make sure that the buttermilk is rinsed out of it, because if it's not, it can go bad if you don't use it fast enough. It can get rancid. But you can see that my water's pretty well clear, not 100%, but I'm going to call it good. The next step is to work as much of the water out of your ball of butter that you can. And this is a common butter paddle. It's got grooves on it so that it can work the butter easier instead of just sliding on past. It kind of gets a grip on it. And this is a wooden bowl. It's not necessarily the right kind of wooden bowl because I think it's a little too deep. I would prefer to have something that was a little more shallow, but this is what I've got, so this is what we're going to use. Now take your paddle and spread the butter out. And as you do it, you can see that the water is pooling down there at the bottom. It kind of pops out, in fact, as you come to it, and there's a little bit of whiteness to that, so I still had a little bit of buttermilk in there, but you don't want to overwork your butter at this point because it, for some reason that I don't really know, it kind of turns it greasy instead of nice fluffy butter. You need to get as much of the water or the milk, in some cases here, out as you can, and it's done by spreading and scraping it. The next step is to add the salt, and to do that I'm going to put my butter on this cutting board and I'm going to spread it out a little bit. Now you can use whatever salt you want to use. What I've got here is some pink salt. For this amount of butter, I'm adding about a teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to work that, spread it around, fold it in half, over itself over and over until I feel like I've got the salt distributed throughout the whole thing. I can't wait to try this butter. I'm kind of a butter fiend. So we're trying it on crackers because I don't have any fresh baked bread right now. Go ahead, taste it if you want.
You first.
Me first.
Might be something wrong with it.
I think it tastes really good.
A lot better than store-bought.
Yeah. He doesn't like store-bought butter because he thinks it tastes like nothing but grease. This could actually have aged another day, I think. It's still got a pretty fresh taste to it, even though it was set up. It tastes good enough that we're going for more. Okay, next time you see me, I'm going to be making cottage cheese out of the same milk that I got this cream from for the butter. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.